And we are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicenda. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, and it's Wizard Week, which means we've got another Wizard Moot, a gathering of wizards that have come together today, where every day this week we are talking about a different part and a different wizard from 7-part Pact, Jade Dragon's game that's live right now over on Kickstarter. You can see the link in the bottom corner of the screen. It's also linked in the description, but it's ttrpg.link/7pp. That's the number 7 followed by the letter P and then the letter P again. Very excited to have everybody here with us again today. If you're watching out there right now, let us know where you are tuning in from or what your favorite wizard in the Pact is. Hopefully it's the Sage, because that's who we're talking about today. Jay, for folks who haven't been joining us so far, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, 7-part Pact, and the Sage?
Yeah. 7-part Pact is my fantastical ornate wizard game. Been working on it for 4 years. It is a game about the 7 most powerful wizards in this fantasy world and their responsibilities, their obligations, their powers, their misery, all that fun stuff. The Sage is responsible for the future of the Pact, kind of maintaining the cosmic status quo and manipulating events to kind of preserve that. And is kind of an enigmatic weirdo.
Nothing any game player would at all associate with being an enigmatic weirdo. Certainly not me.
I'm normal.
I'm super excited to dive into the Sage. Also, every day we bring in 2 professional sages to talk about what it's like to be a sage. And today we've got with us Caleb and, non-surprisingly, Sage, also too joining us.
The most full-time sage we could get.
Yeah, let's start with a little bit of nominal determinism. Sage, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find you online if they want to find you, and what it was like to play as the Sage.
Yeah, so my name is Sage Tomorrow. I'm a collagist. I do a lot of different kinds of art. I'm dipping my toes more and more heavily into weirdo TTRPG design. I'm doing a lot of solo one-page stuff, and I'm working on some bigger stuff too. But you can find me on Blue Sky and pretty much anywhere else at non-binary. That's non-binary, but it's an L instead of the I. And for me, playing the Sage was it was a little short-lived, but it was I felt like it was a challenge that I found myself rising to, which I really appreciate. I have a background in really difficult games like competitive Melee. And so the feeling of asking of being asked by a game to do more than I feel at the beginning that I can, and finding myself rising to it, it's just one of the greatest things you can feel in gaming.
Awesome.
Competitive Melee should be a comp for a wizard game, I think.
I mean,
should be one of the X meets X titles.
Awesome, love it. Glad to have you with us. But if you could pick one item and one humble magic that the Sage can use or has to have in your daily life, which ones would you pick?
So in terms of the items, I would pick the there's a ceremonial animal mask that allows you to speak to animals of the species of the mask. My Sage had a magpie's mask, and I obviously would love to converse with corvids. And in terms of humble magic, I would love to be able to just sort of appear directly behind people at random, stand on walls, things like that. It's just sort of moving like I'm Yugi from when he's in the puzzle.
You can do that already, I think.
I can do that already, but I'm not supposed to let people know that.
Love it. Awesome. Super excited to have you with us here and kind of unpack your experience of playing the Sage as we go. Let's meet our other guest. A big hello from the chat, specifically Aaron King, to Normal Caleb. Normal Caleb, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, where people can find you on the internet?
Hello, Aaron. I'm extremely normal. Caleb Zane Hewitt. You can find me calebzane.bski.social on the Blue Sky website. You can also find my work at hauntedtable.games. I'm the designer of Triangle Agency and creative director at Haunted Table. Right now, probably the coolest stuff you can find me do is on our Patreon, which you can find by just sort of exploring the internet for Haunted Table and see my writing on Triangle Agency. And I am working on a podcast with very normal Aaron King, who's in the chat right now, called Nightcrawler is My Boyfriend, where we read X-Men comics and live design a TTRPG 5 issues at a time, basically by picking something out of those issues, building one mechanic based on it, and hoping that eventually we have a big Franken game that functions in some form. It's been a blast so far. I really, really love it. So I hope you'll check it out.
It is the Plus One EXP Warehouse's favorite podcast to listen to and talk about the next day. I'm not kidding.
I'm so glad you put that on the record, because now I'm going to start quoting that everywhere. I'm going to put it on
Please
everything.
do. We can send you a
box.
badge if you want. And so, awesome. Tell people a little about what it was like to play the Sage, and then what items from the Might and Trapping you would want to pick up.
Yeah, so I've played 3 wizards. I've played the Hierophant. I've played the war battles. Warlock. And which is funny because I literally was saying it and couldn't have ever gotten to Warlock in that moment. And I have played Sage, and I love all of them. One of the big things I like about Sage is that, and this is going to come up when I start picking my favorite item, in terms of like power fantasy and TTRPGs, I think the Sage is the one that lines up the most with both my dreams and my insecurities. I was looking at the Humble Magics when you brought them up, and I was like, it would be actually dangerous to everybody on Earth if I was given any of these. It would not be a good call. Like it was already a bad move for the planet when they gave me 24/7 Discord access to my friends. So being able to do that in people's minds is what I would pick, but it would not be smart. And then erasing any memory of your presence, arrival, or actions, unfortunately, would be another one that I would massively overuse due to my propensity to leave a social situation and decide that actually everybody there wanted to kill me because of something simple I said. So that's probably what I would pick. In terms of the items, my favorite one is the 2-headed bird. I immediately picked this within like a second of looking at it. The one who lies. One head lies and one head always tells the truth, but it takes your orders. And the amount of drama I already started setting up with just this bird. I've talked about this before. I tend to play my wizards less than the other things around them. Like I tend to play other people's companions. I tend to do less of that. And I think I might have voiced the bird for more total sentences than my Sage spoke out loud during that campaign. It might have been. I love this bird. That's me.
Awesome. I love that. So excited here. So excited to have you both with us here today. We have started, Caleb, I'm going to ask for a flex on you then. Go up to the top of the Sage document, that first paragraph there that starts Behold the Sage.
Mm-hmm.
Can you read that paragraph? I was just going to ask you to give us a dramatic reading, but can you present it as the bird specifically from your game of 7-part?
Well, it has. I guess they're speaking together because they want to complicate whether you think of this as truth or lie.
That's great.
So,
I love it.
But oh my gosh, what did the bird sound like? I'm not going to torture everybody with my squawky voice. It was very particular, just a few words at a time. But
we'll imagine it. But you go ahead and give us a dramatic reading of
Behold the Sage, known as Watcher of the Stars, Jewel Bearer, and the Hermetic Lord of Time. He tends to the endless possibilities of what will be, the capricious future, and those with ambition to become something greater than they are now. He is oft of a cunning and esoteric temperament, and his fate is governed by the moon and the metal silver. It is said the first Sage refused to join the Pact, and it was only in the face of certain apocalypse that he set aside his selfishness and signed his name.
Love it. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and dive in. Just a reminder, if you're watching and you have questions, feel free to drop them in as we go. I'll pepper them in as they make sense, or we've got a special section set aside at the end explicitly for questions, but drop them in as we go. So Jay, let's dive in a little bit more deeply into who the Sage is, what they do, kind of what their role in the Pact and the world is.
So the Sage is kind of the mentor of the Pact, right? The Sage is a Yoda, truly, right? The Sage is a wrinkly little guy, not always wrinkly, but like very often kind of a wrinkly little guy who lives alone on a little lagoon and manipulates the hell out of people through dreams and visions. The Sage's big concern is that the Sage has access to the dreamscape. And at the center of the dreamscape has been constructed this brilliant, shining future of the Pact, which is this like basically this inevitable certainty that like even if every wizard dies, the pact still maintains its functionality, right? The future of the pact is effectively the happy ending that the sage is preserving. The moment the game ends, the status of the future of the pact is what the sage uses to determine the epilogue of the game. So regardless of when the game ends, via intentionally or unintentionally, that is kind of the check for the sage's work. The way the sage maintains the future of the pact, which is slowly kind of leaking its certainty, especially as the dreaming world becomes less certain itself, the future of the pact becomes increasingly less likely. The sage has to preserve it by giving characters destinies, which are tarot cards that kind of say what that character is supposed to be. The sage tests those destinies by kind of putting the characters in situations or by like observing them while they're having scenes, and uses that to kind of build up omens onto those characters. And then when those characters either learn of their destinies or die, the sage harvests those omens, putting them back into the future of the pact. So the sage is effectively kind of doing this betting game where he's trying to get characters to behave to either behave the way that the sage wants them to or to behave really against it, and then cash that in periodically in order to maintain the future of the pact. Yeah, so that's kind of the sage's game, very different from what everyone else is doing.
How early did the sage kind of get solidified? Where in the development process were you like, we need the sage?
It was late because the sage wasn't in the first set, right? At all.
The sage was not in the first set, yeah. The sage's equivalent at that time was the librarian, which was just like a completely different thing. Went through a ton of iteration over time. The sage and the sorcerer have kind of tossed various things back and forth with each other. And it took a lot of even getting to that idea. I think that part of it came about in like 2020. Like, I know that was crystallized by the time, Caleb, we did our playtest. I think the online playtest, if I remember right.
Our first playtest, the sage did not exist yet, but by the time I played the sage, like probably a few weeks after it was created, I think.
Yeah. I have such a strong memory of like being on a plane sometime in 2023 or 2024 and like having the sage come to me and being like, oh fuck, okay, there we go. That's how it all fits together. So it was much later into the process, and it took a lot of iteration to kind of get there. But I do love the I think it's one of my favorite. It's maybe one of my favorite games that any of the wizards are playing.
I love it. Super excited. So for Sage and Caleb, how did y'all do with this? Tell us a little bit more about your play. How did y'all do with this sowing and reaping of omens?
Yeah, so the version I played actually wasn't really doing the sowing and reaping at the time. That's in a version 4 edition. So that I played, like, I think it was in 2 and 3 was kind of when I was playing Sage. So a lot of what I was engaging with was specifically just tracking everybody's individual destinies and how well those were paying off. Jay has done an amazing job splitting what that mechanic was into actually 2 mechanics now, where the Sage has both individual destinies that are now less restrictive. At the time, what are now called cycles in the final version was a lot more like what each individual character was going down. And now they're a little more open. They're a little more about how the character behaves rather than specifically what they do, which I want to say is an amazing change. And then the cycles now are the things where you're following a little closely specific events, and those have to do with like scenes that are built between characters. But in terms of how I played it, how I enjoyed it, the thing that's the same between these two that I was obsessed with and held on to, and that I referenced earlier when I said my wizard didn't do very much, is like getting to talk about dreamers and getting to be the character who kind of monitors NPCs for exactly how important they are and how much impact they're going to have. Plus, I don't know exactly how it will play at everybody's table, but at ours, it also meant that the Sage, when I was playing it, was often in charge of casting, which is a thing that I really like when I'm playing RPGs and open RPGs. So I did a lot of like, oh, I get first pick of these characters, and I get to know exactly which of my friends would play which of these the best. And that part was really, really fun.
Oh, that's fun. Very cool. Sage, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, so I did a good bit of sewing, not so much the reaping. But the uh, the thing that was fun for me was as I sort of figured out where I was placing everyone was I would just start putting omens on, on because we were doing an online playtest. I would just start putting my little omen tokens on other people's play sheets, and they would, be doing something and then go back to their play sheet and go, what does that mean? What's happening to me?
Yes.
After certain things would happen. And, I was told, oh, you don't have to do it on the play sheet. And I said, no, 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 no.
No, it's very fun to
It's
do it on
important.
play sheet.
It's important for me that they know that something is happening and that they also don't know exactly what is happening.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really engaging part of play for me, was setting up the expectation that there were things going on underneath it all, that we weren't quite aware of yet.
What you just said reminded me of like one of my favorite parts of playing Sage, especially with the secret destinies and with the way you were like moving through space and dealing with dreamers. Sometimes when you're another wizard and someone sees you approach them with something, there's a little bit of fear, because a lot of the other wizards' consequences can be like immediately negative in kind of a fun and interesting way. But with Sage, I noticed people would be like, oh my God, what are you going to give me? Like, what gift are you about to hand me? What character do I get to meet? And there was always a very different energy coming from that versus like, oh, sorry, I threw some zombies in your land. It was a different energy that I think got people pretty hyped in a fun way.
Yeah, 100%. I had a sorry.
Oh, no, please go for it.
I had a really, really great scene the first time I changed someone's destiny, where I walked into the dreaming pool with just a knife, and I told them, you had a restless, dreamless sleep, and you don't remember. You woke up knowing, you had lost something, but you don't remember what. The first time I had, sort of changed someone's destiny, I think I really set the tone.
My favorite part of the Sage is everyone going around each week and being like, this week I went to the gate of death. Another one's like, this week I comforted a supplicant, and this week I moved some clouds around. And then it's the sage's turn. The sage goes, you had a bad dream last night. In your dream you had a vision of yourself standing upon a tower of thorns, and you felt a wind push against your back. What do you do? And you're like, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, thanks for that. And then like you say like, oh well, I fall from the tower, and they're like, okay, and then they move some things around. You're like,
I love it. For each of you, we talked about this with some of the other ones. This kind of falls into a little bit of the symmetry between players, but every type of wizard gets a little bit of control over their domain as you're setting up the world. Do y'all remember what laws of dreaming y'all enforced when you were playing as the sage? These are also, I will read them out loud. We're age 18 in the draft 4 book if you want to look at that. They are never give away your own name, never speak ill of another, never look down at your own body, never attempt to read what is written, never reveal your mortal face, never guess what the future holds, or never describe the past. They may have also changed since
they've changed. I was gonna say they've definitely changed.
But those are
Caleb
the current
played.
ones.
Yeah.
So what I did at the time was really leaned into the fairy element of this character. I had like a character who was this very kind of resistant sage. He didn't really want to be a sage and was really trying to spend as much time hanging out with all the hot fairies as he possibly could and do as little work as possible. And so a lot of them I leaned into fairy style rules. And so the like name one or describing the past would probably have been pretty strong ones for that character at the time too.
Yeah, the ones I chose were never give away your own name and never reveal your mortal face. And I mean, I think that really just sort of goes into the sort of resistance towards being in the Pact and sort of resistance towards any sort of human identity at all that my sage was experiencing.
It's interesting. Like we've had a lot of guests on who, and not all of them, but we've had a number who are like, I kind of resisted the idea of the pact. It's interesting to hear two sages also talk about that to me. Like I only have one experience of play to draw from. Jay, is that common, or do we just luck out with two kind of reluctant sages?
Well, I think the sage is an interesting spot because he kind of is able to be more. The way I've talked about it before with a friend, where when I was first working on the sage, I had a friend who was worried that the sage would be too nice, that the mechanics of the sage were kind of too forgiving to the players.
So funny.
I know. I don't think he feels that way anymore. But one of the things about it that I think is important is the sage almost has kind of this like the sage both has the luxury to, in the short term, be pretty chill with it, right? Like the sage gets to be Yoda. The sage gets to be the one. Sage gets to be Gandalf. The sage gets to be kind of like, it matters not the affairs of man, right? Like I'm in my cave. I'm dealing with dreams. Your short-term petty squabbles. Maybe the pact is bad, right? Maybe things are bad. The sage is also the one who has the biggest mechanism for changing the pact, which is to say that any attempts to make it so that, for example, there are women allowed in the pact, or to allow, like to make it so that like there's more than 7 wizards or things like that, requires changing the future of the pact itself, which can only be done when the sage kind of really colossally fucks up his domain. So the sage is like, if the sage wants to play the game well, that requires so much more immediately than any other player maintaining the status quo long term. But that gives the sage a bit of a luxury in the short term to be more resistant towards the pact as a concept, because there's still a lot of mechanical pressure towards inevitability. And that's kind of what the sage is all about. And so I think you do get like sages who are a lot more neutral or resistant towards the pact, but also I have seen many sages who express that they do not approve of the pact. I've yet to see a sage destroy the pact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that they are the one who has the ability to do that, and I've never even seen one try. So I think that kind of speaks to like their mentality there.
It's so interesting to hear you describe the sage as the character that gets kind of like the who sees the inevitability of it, and the only one who has a sense of like the happy ending of the pact, and also for them to then be the most neutral reluctant, like the only one.
That's because the sage is the only one who can see. That's because the sage's game is predicated on maintaining a status quo forever, right? The sage is pulling a Joe Biden.
Yeah.
The sage's victory condition is keeping things pretty much the same as they were before. Maybe a little worse, but that's an acceptable margin of error, right? And that's kind of the torture of the sage, right? Is it's like to imagine a world without the pact is like the sage is in charge of making sure that it's not possible to imagine a world without the pact.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the ultimate. That's like what you are caretaking with the future of the pact is like, what else could there be?
I love that. No, it's so interesting. Like within the Christian tradition, like the vision of hell as an eternal continuity, like has a lot of resonance there. Like because that's a terrifying thing for a lot of people. The concept of eternal sameness is how that's often presented. It's a really breaking thing for a lot of people. That's absolutely terrifying. And so it feels like there's some of the same type of concept funneled into the sage's vision of the pact also.
It's both something that I think people find terrifying, but it's also what power is designed to maintain.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's that Ursula Le Guin quote that's like, capitalism seems inevitable, so too did the divine right of kings. And the thing about that quote is it's a very powerful and affecting quote for imagining a world outside of capitalism. The thing is also the divine right of kings was self-reproducing and self-maintaining for more than 2,000, 3,000 years, right? And so there's kind of a little bit of that like existential horror of like the sage's job is to curtail the possibility space, right? And like long term, right? And like kind of in the short term does these stories and narratives and kind of allows people to be expressive and then reels them back in. But long term, the thing of it, right, is it's the same mechanism that kind of any power structure needs, which is to say that, oh well, common sense says that the only path forward is the one that we have right now.
And it also is reflected, in a game design sense, in the way that the sage also represents the boundaries of what the game tells you the stories are allowed to be about. So like the reason you have a limited number of destinies, the reason you have a limited number of cycles is because those are the stories the game is like about, and any story that happens outside of that is like kind of explicitly not sanctioned by the world of the game, which I think is a really neat thing to give to a particular character.
Yeah, the sage's imagination is limited, right?
Yeah.
This, like the sage as the wizard of imagination is curtailed by the limits of a finite game's ability to imagine infinite things.
Yeah.
And the sage kind of is locked in on like, well, there's only so much you can even like try to bring about, you know?
Yeah, it's cool. And I think a lot about how something that occurred to me a lot when I was playing with the Destinies was that feeling of limitation of like, all the choices I have to make are going to end with somebody becoming a horrible monster, right? Or like, gonna, and just knowing like, well, you get to have that amazing, constant, and like 100 times a game combined feeling of I'm setting a trap for you and I'm building you a present, like at the exact same time, in the way that you get as a GM in a more traditional game when you're like working off of an adventure book, for example. The sage gets to do the kind of play that feels the most like that, I think.
The sage really has the ability to set these trap cards and flip them. Caleb, I remember in the live playtest you and I did at Wizard Week, Wizard Weekend, where we like had a whole weekend together playing game nonstop. I remember towards the end, our sage just kind of person after person, like we do a scene, and then the sage just be like, boom, boom, like just like flipping these cards over and like being like, got you, right? Like, you know, like revealing how we'd like stumble into his traps.
It led to the sage getting changed because it was such a perfect sweep. It was they did such a good job nudging all of us into positions that I think that is like a huge reason of why you immediately started redrafting the sage.
Well, because the thing was, it was so perfect, but then it also the challenge of 7 per Pact is always like, I want a game that works well for short games and long games,
right?
And that was so perfect for short games, right? Like that 18 hours, it's like at the end of that short game, 18 hours. You know, we get the end of the weekend and the sage gets everyone. And it's like, oh, you got me. That was such a perfect ending. But it's like, if we were doing a campaign, the question is now, well, what happens next? Right? It's like, we've done these destinies, we've flipped these things over, but we're still playing the game. And now the sage just doesn't have as much to do. So the redraft was really like, how can I make sure that the sage is not just that the sage's structures are not finite in what the beats look like, but instead can kind of like that the sage, like everyone else, can have periods of things going really well and things going really poorly, right? Things all exploding and then things quieting down and then building up again, which was less present in the earlier draft.
Yeah, love it. Did Caleb and Sage, did either of you, let's go to Sage first, did either of y'all have a favorite like destiny that you got to assign to, like a narrative of like getting to flip that card on somebody that you got to lay out ahead of time?
I did not, unfortunately. My playtest, much like the Pact itself, was somewhat troubled in terms of our ability to form a wizard moot.
I was having a stress breakdown.
I was also having a lot of personal stuff go on at the same time. So you know, I think we were you know, locked in.
Yeah, we were getting a little wizard melted.
I don't think I got there, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Your destiny was being laid out in a different way. That's totally fine. Caleb, how about you?
My destiny was moving to Philadelphia on about 30 days notice.
Yeah. Let me see. Honestly, the playtest that Jay is talking about, where someone else played Sage and I was there for it, had some of the most iconic twists for me. In my campaign, the big one was there was an NPC who I set up to become really important over time for this other character. This woman who I started playing, who was the wife of a farmer, who I like brought in and immediately made it clear this woman's extremely cool and very important, and you have no idea why, and was able to build that up over weeks and through scenes kind of quietly be working up that destiny. And I can't remember what the final one was, but I did some kind of trap for one of the wizards where the second she got them to turn her down, and that let me activate my trap card in a really, really fun way. I can't remember what the result of that was, but I know that it culminated in a big a giant like amalgam of ghosts bursting from the earth as a result of
I remember
her being a cool character that was a farmer. So that was really neat, like a big meteor of ghosts. In that playtest we're talking about though, what I recall the most amazing called shot that I've ever seen done was we had a sequence where the Wizard King's crown had come into play. I don't know if anyone's used this, but it's an actual item that exists in the game that has a description and has powers. It's a very, very powerful artifact.
I can read it. I can read it real quick because I've got the Faustian open.
Oh yeah, throw it out.
The Wizard King's crown is, drumroll please. Where's that bastard? The crown of the Wizard King. Whoever wears this crown is known by all to be the true king of the world. He may seize the throne of Isha if he wishes, or demand the loyalty of any other mortal or fairy kingdom. Even the stars recognize his authority. Each month, he decides the position of each planet in the sky.
Yeah, it's a hugely powerful thing for this game. It lets you move the planets around like wild, and the Sage conspired to get it put in my hands. I was playing the Warlock at the time, and I was playing a Warlock who had a lot of reasons to want power. Like that's you're the Warlock, so every single Warlock has a lot of reasons to want power. But I was like, managing this court. My family was splitting. My brother was the Faustian. We were like fighting. It would be amazing to have all this power. I wasn't even sure why I made this call at the time, but I was like in character. I had been given the crown, and without any obvious prompting, without any clear hints, I like knew what I was going to do. And it was that I was going to put the crown on the stage. Like my character got scared, panicked, and put the crown on the stage instead, which, if I remember right, activated both of our cards simultaneously. It was like, mine was ended with like, we'll give up the chance at great power, and the Sage's was like, we'll be gifted like the future or something. And and it was one of those moments of play where that player, Kai, I was truly stunned because I genuinely thought I was making like a completely original big move of nobody's been hinting this at me. It would be totally obvious in this moment that they want me to take the crown. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give the crown away and then have that reveal happen in front of me that really giving it away was the thing that locked in the end of the game. Was like this totally wild play moment that I still will remember forever, I think.
I think that one of my favorite tricks of the Sage is reverse psychology someone, right? Is if you can just find ways to like just make them think that their destiny is a different thing and you're baiting them along, and so they get rebellious and they try to push back against you, and then you get them with the like, actually this whole time you've been doing the thing I wanted you to do, like you've fallen for my trap card. It's just such a like a it makes you feel like the evil bastard, right? It's that moment of like just like you're trying to just Xanatos Gambit everybody in the game over and over, and it's one of those moments that really makes it click.
And talk about like bleed. Also, I was like mad because I think of myself as someone who's like very smart, like very good at tracking what narratives are happening, like really good at reading what other people want from me. And so having this like this reveal that like I had 100% perfectly fallen for it was something that I in my life don't have that many experiences with, right? So having that happen in front of me was this like big moment of like grappling with how I had been so like confidently and successfully manipulated. Was like a really, really fun thing that this game kind of gave me.
Awesome. Love it. Before we switch over to kind of talking a little bit more about the dreaming itself, some of the ways that in other parts of the world of Isha and the way that the wizard does that, any other final thoughts on playing as the wizard specifically, or parts of the wizard, Jay, that you want us to chat about,
or choices you made with your playbook? Any memorable choices you made about your wizard? The Sage has an interesting thing with gender. Did either of you end up engaging with that?
Which part do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, gender. Gender.
Oh, yes. Wait, one of these playbooks has an interesting thing with gender?
Can you believe it? Yeah, that's why I asked what do you mean. I was like, don't they all?
Everyone's got their own unique little gender.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Sage?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. The under my choice for "You Are a Man" is all wizards are. However, within your heart, you know. My sage's choice was You have wandered into the furthest reaches of the dreaming world, more of an archetype than a person, and what remains is hardly a man at all. So for the sort of concept that I had for my sage was that they were sort of scooped up by their master and sort of pressed into this at a young age through psychological and magical manipulation. Um, and the experience of sort of being um, depersoned in this way, sort of forced to become, the next sage, more than anything, combined with they had this experience of the dreaming where, every moment spent in the dreaming, every was equivalent to years. Time lasted a lot longer in the dreaming than it did in real life. One night could be like a month or a year uh, uh, worth in the dreaming. And so this sort of created someone who was bodily and in a worldly sense very young, less than two scores, but was surrounded by fairies in the dreaming. And as much as I could, I made their companions non-human, and their master had been dead. Um, all of this sort of combined to create someone who was so totally disconnected from personhood that they had sort of no real idea anymore internally of what gender even could be to them, right? Of what being a man was just about as alien as being a woman or being anything else could be to them.
Mm.
Yeah, I know these have changed since I played because one of these was a plot that I made for myself that I would have picked if it had been one, which is the you carry within your dreams a young girl, beautiful and innocent, and you hope to someday find a new vessel for her and raise her as a daughter. The way I actually built my sage was as my image of him was as like a masculine boogeyman. Like I wanted like his appearance to anyone else to kind of like radiate the thing that every other character was fearing. This is like a violent he moved based on one of the changes of magic. He moved in like a stuttery panel by panel way and was this kind of like scary aggressive figure who often didn't even speak. He would just appear by people and do something, in a few frames and then leave. And I really wanted to lean into this very masculine but like non-communicative. But his like background story every single week was I was spending at least 1 week building a child. Like that was happening in the background in my Atoll the whole time. And looking at that option now is like that's absolutely what I would have chosen at the time, because that is what was going on with him, was this like this desire to create a child from whole cloth that would allow him to kind of vicariously live a life that wasn't bound by fate, which he really saw himself as having been. He was like he was looking at his whole life as this like big tragedy that had all been decided for him. And so I was hoping that I could, via this story of making a scary child, like eventually get to another angle on that. But yeah, I don't remember what my original choice was for him though.
Panel guy.
Panel guy. Yep.
No, that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit more as we kind of transition over into the dreaming about the other role of the sage as the watcher of the stars, because we talked about how some of the mechanics work, how these different, like you're putting out these different destinies and creating these plot lines, but as the watcher of stars, like a big part of your job is to help pull the threads of conversation happening around the table together in a way that the lower playbooks really don't have to concern themselves with. They're doing their thing. The sage's whole thing is, what is everybody else doing so we can make the future happen the way we're supposed to, and that comes out in the celestial audience. And in some way, shapes, or form, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, this is, I think, most similar to what a lot of people think of as the traditional like story game GM role of like, you give me all the things you're interested in, I'll figure out how they all kind of come together. How was that present early on in the Sage playbook also?
I knew before I figured out the Sage, ever since I was a little girl, I knew that I wanted a GM who was trapped in the narrative. part of like the joke of 7-part Pact for me is that you've got all these different GM styles kind of all hanging out at the table, and the Sage's GM style is really like maintaining the like it's the like I'm improvising narratives on the spot. It's the idea of like trying to kind of like weave everything together into a plot line that like can be told as a story afterwards. And so it gives a lot of those tools that like a lot of traditional GMs use, right? Like when, Brennan or Matt Mercer or whatever talk about like the things they do as a GM, a lot of the stuff they're doing is kind of stuff that the Sage is set up to do, both as Star Watcher and as Sage themselves. The thing that's interesting to me is that the Sage, more than any other wizard, I think really blurs the celestial audience wizard distinction, right? The Sage is someone where like you can kind of play the celestial audience more than you play your wizard, right? You can kind of be very present as Star Watcher, even further than like you may be as part of the like as a wizard who's wandering around in the world. And that's very on purpose. And I think that part of the joke of the Sage to me is the idea of someone who's trying to do the narrative GM thing in universe, right? Like this is a someone whose job it is to kind of try to be Brennan Lee Mulligan, right? Like that's kind of the bit. Um, and like that's your character's job, and your character can choose to be bad at their job, right? Like that's okay too. So the Sage is very entangled with the celestial audience, and you get a lot of kind of interesting moments where sometimes like the celestial, like the Star Watcher will introduce plot lines or introduce characters that are mechanically beneficial for the Sage, right? They'll kind of like they'll set themselves up, as a GM to enable their character. And so they've got kind of a different relationship than everyone else does. And when facilitating, I often encourage facilitators to take on either the Sage or the Sorcerer, just because it gives a lot of a Sage who is tuning out of the game can sometimes lead to the game like kind of uncohering, right? Like the Sage's job is really to kind of like help, like, oh, you mentioned that character. Maybe that character is also this guy who came up earlier, or like, oh, maybe they're brothers, or like, oh, you talked about that weird storm. Maybe that storm like is connected to the farmland over here, right? The Sage kind of is like drawing these building the connective tissue. And that's something I think people do naturally when they play, but the Sage kind of accelerates it and leans into it.
Love it. For our two guests, did that come up at all for you as a celestial audience? Was that something like you felt really driven by, or are there moments that kind of stood out to you where you got to kind of really kind of pull some of those elements together?
Yeah, it came up pretty early in my game. There was some scuttlebutt about real magical items sort of surfacing, which were rare or basically unheard of at the time. And so sort of pulling together a couple of threads, I think, from the Faustian and someone else, I ended up trying to sort of inventing a pirate captain, um, to sort of invent like a high fantasy The Wire situation, like an HBO Prime TV organized crime situation,
Wait,
wherein
I did this too with
someone
pirates. Yes, yes, yes.
wherein someone in like the port city or whatever had made a great racket selling bogus magical items, and then in comes this other guy from out of town, selling real actual magical items, and sort of setting up a conflict there.
That's so good.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, my playing this, it was all over this. I no matter which wizard I'm playing, I tend to be a lot more focused on what's going on with everybody all over the game than with my own wizard's
Mhm.
goals. I tend to play better as like a sort of in that kind of excited to facilitate and support role, no matter who I'm playing. It's part of why I really love the Warlock too, because there's so many people I got to talk about that weren't just my character. But I also just want to say, I think the Sage, for me personally, part of why I like it and part of what makes it tough is that I found the process to be the most full of heartbreak of any of the Wizards games, because you really see by yourself, completely alone, the things that don't happen. like the things you think might happen that then don't. You like really see that as the sage. You like are like, oh, this plot could go this way. This character could get important. I'm like I'm putting a destiny here because this person might become king, and then it becomes obvious they're not going to become king, and it happened in an interesting way, but you don't even know how to talk about it with anybody else because you weren't allowed to tell them. So you spend a lot of time doing something that's very familiar to me as a writer, which is like having these little tiny heartbreaks when things don't work or do work, or when characters do things you don't expect, and having to kind of navigate through that by yourself. Whereas I think in some of the other games, a lot of the things you lose or those bits you see are a little more mechanical. So they attach less to the emotional part of my brain than the narrative does. Like if somebody moves weird on the court table or whatever, I'm like, oh yeah, I might have felt something about that in the moment in a board game way, but then when the next turn rolls around, I'm not going to think about that. There are threads that I tried to build that didn't happen that I still feel as like, some grief for. And I want to be clear, this is good. This is very good. It's not a bad thing, but it is it was part of what made the stage so engrossing and engaging to play, is that I spent almost every session staring at everybody the whole time, being like, are you going to do the thing? Or you don't even know what you just did to me. Like,
awesome.
Yeah.
I think partially rhetorical, but Brewer in the chat says the stage's job is to create and maintain the giant conspiracy board.
Yes.
Yeah. That used to be there. I tried so hard to find a way to make that more literal. I tried so hard. There was not a good way for me to implement conspiracy boards into the Sage's game, but I tried so hard.
Yeah, I wanted that on this one.
Yeah, bring your own conspiracy board. The Sage is, I think, the wizard who benefits the most from a little notebook.
Yep.
All the wizards benefit from a little notebook, but really, truly, if you're playing the Sage, have a little notebook with you, for God's sake.
My note stock was wild. It was going
crazy.
Yeah, my first session, I started with like 1 tab, and then I was like, I need 2 more tabs. And then I was like, I might actually need 3 or 4 more tabs. And, I'm working on a laptop here. Everything is like the size of a postage stamp at this point.
Every scene, I was like, okay, well, I got to make sure I have this character's card up and this character's card up, and I'm staring at it, and what do I say? And now with the cycles, you're like, can I make this cycle happen with these characters in this scene? Like, yeah, it's really, really fun.
And that's sort of the genius of the game, is that I can't imagine how it would feel over the table, because I was, constantly flipping back and forth and, like cross-checking my omens and my diagrams. And it really did feel like being like, I set out to play an overwhelmed but determined young wizard, trying to, make some shit happen. And that is exactly what I did. Was I, was flipping through my notes and all that all the time.
I'm so excited for people to see when they play physically how the actual interactions of the game turn you into a really good piece of like an NPC in everyone else's like moment, because everybody turns into a different looking wizard scrambling over a strange set of pieces. So I'm really excited for people to get that experience. We played with such a like highly developed set of like play tools at the time when we did the weekend, and that was one of the best parts, is looking over and seeing somebody moving pieces like they are looking at a war board. And knowing that even though they might not exactly be feeling like I'm moving a war board around, when you look at them, you get that sense. So you just are fully in it with them. It's great.
Y'all are my warboard. And Dan Rand in the chat asked the question. I think this is just good for everybody, but we'll start with Jay. Do you think the dispersed GM roles are a good a kind of entryway for people who have predominantly been players at their table and not GM'd before?
Yeah, totally. I think that certainly, I think if you've never felt confident GMing in any capacity, I definitely recommend starting with one of the lower 4 wizards, right? The Necromancer, Hierophant, Warlock, Mariner. Those would be a little bit friendlier for someone who's like, if you are scared to, like, if you were like been terrified of GMing, I'd recommend maybe starting with one of those 4 first, and then coming to the Faustian, Sage, or Sorcerer a little bit later. But if you are someone who has been lightly interested in GMing or has been open to it, you've just never found the right space for it, absolutely dive in, right? This is a very good opportunity for that. It's very forgiving on account of you are not running the game for your players, right? You are all playing the game together, and that means that there's a lot more scaffolding there to catch you when things go, when like if you're worried that something has gone wrong, there are people who can help you out, right?
Love it. Anybody else have thoughts on that, Caleb or Sage?
Absolutely. I don't know if Jay agrees with me here, but my opinion is that the skills of a good player are way more important for you to bring to this game than the skills of a good GM, because I think the systems of the game are set up to support and scaffold you in that GM role to a degree that, like, yes, the game will teach you how to do that. But the things the game cannot teach you are the things you mostly need from good play, making really strong choices, having a really clear idea of your character and what their desires and goals are. That kind of stuff is more important. So if you're someone who's really familiar with play and you really are comfortable as a player and you play one of those roles that has a like smaller GM load compared to like the Sage, you're going to have an even bigger impact on the game bringing those tools, I think, and you'll leave having learned a lot from the systems about GMing if you take them into other games.
Yeah. Sage, any additional thoughts?
No, I mean, I think you both really kind of hit it right on the head. I think I would have put myself in the camp of had been eager to GM but hadn't really had the space to do so. And the Sage had just, I would say, the right amount of scaffolding for me to be able to, as play continued, sort of see the structure and figure out when it was a good opportunity for me to, reach out and grab some threads and make something happen.
Love it. I also, Andrew, I think that answered kind of your second question about which wizard style is most likely to do that, and the answer that Jay provided also too. But if you've got more on that or want to hear a little bit more, feel free to ask away. I've got a question I want to kind of pivot to, and that's talking about how time works in the game and Ishak, because it is a central part, and we've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I don't know that we've really hit kind of the core, hey, you're deciding what you're doing with limited time function that is central to the play of the game. Like we've talked about everybody's board, but also this is because we're talking about the Lord of Time, a good time to talk about some of the limits on how time moves, and also the Sage's role in time as a general concept also too. So Jay, can you just break down for people in what episode is this, 6, like talk a little bit about how we spend time each month, and then like a little bit about how time is treated within the game.
Yeah, so each month, each wizard has 4 weeks of time, which are tokens. They also have one engagement, which is not really the engagement is not a unit of time. It is instead just kind of a declaration of a spotlight onto like a particular interaction or like an invitation into a social scene. You place those 4 weeks of time. One of them often goes on the wizard moot to attend the wizard moot at the end of each month, although it's not necessary. The other 3, use in your own domain, you use with your companions, it's kind of the core currency of the game, right? Kind of spend time to do this or that is a thing that comes up all over the damn place. And it's in Seven Part Pact, right? It's one of the big limiters, right? Wizards are kind of more than anything limited by their mortality. It's one of the hardest resources to get a hold of any more of, and it is very hard to like kind of really claim. Like it's your big limiting. It's the big limiter of the mechanical economy. Yeah, I think it shapes play. It makes it so it kind of helps focus like what you're doing. It makes you kind of like really stressed out in terms of like, well, you just can't do everything. There's a lot of things that like you'll want to do that you just won't have time for. It will kind of inform how, it'll inform like what your focus is on. It will, yeah, I think it's a very crucial part of the game. The way it operates ends up being different for each character. The Sage ends up having a bit more free time than other wizards because destinies are kind of so vague and malleable that like sometimes the best use of your time is not actually on any of your domain actions, but it's instead on like
Making a child,
making the great use of your time. Yeah, sculpting a child. I've as Sage like fucked up other wizards' boards on purpose because I need them to take more decisive action and they're being cowardly. So I piss them off in order to like spur them onwards. And like things like that. The Sage is just like the most like you just kind of will fuck around with people, and sometimes you do that like in dreams, and sometimes you just have to go and do that yourself. Sometimes you work on your little projects. You have a lot more freedom than a wizard who like is really stressed out about their domain every single day.
And this is something you and I talked about early on. Like, as the wizards can cast any spell. However, there's not a spell for traveling through time, at least to the past.
Well, and there's very explicitly no spell which allows you to manipulate time. That is one of the few limits of magic. One of the few empty spots in the grimoire is that there's yet to be a spell that has been found that will allow you to cheat the mechanism of time.
But led by the sage, the pact and the wizards can collectively decide, hey, like, we don't know what's going to happen right now. We can move forward in time.
Yes.
Like, we can allow time to pass and move forward. Has
do a
this come
time
up a
skip.
lot in playtesting? Is this something you see happen regularly?
Time skips are pretty rare in shorter games. I'll see them come up in longer campaigns, especially where it's like, okay, we've been playing for a while. We've exhausted kind of the stories we want to tell in this moment. Let's jump forward 50 years, right? And like see where we are on the other side of that. I've done that. I've heard people do that. It's a little tough, right? Because there's this tension between the game kind of creating this feeling of a crushing weight of time and the fact that like it proceeds month by month, which means that like when a big time event, like jumping forward 20 years sometimes feels a little unnatural because it's like, well, you've just kind of like elided so many details of those 20 years. But the way I often kind of personally justify it is that the time we spend playing with the 7-part pact is not necessarily the most. It's not necessarily how every single month goes for the wizards. It's just, we're focusing on kind of an especially tumultuous or dramatic period.
Yeah. No, I think it was one of my very first early questions to you before we played, and then I had forgotten about it, and I asked again, I think, when we actually went to go play, because it is the core essence of the game. Like, it's such a small thing, but I think it's a spell people would assume like, oh, I can do something to fuck around with time, right? And we even heard, I think, was it Brian who talked about making a deal for extra time, like getting an extra week. It was someone got an extra week and therefore aged way faster than everybody else.
Oh yeah, that was a special deal with the devil, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing will happen sometimes where it's like it's almost hard to like speak to things like that when they come up in games because it's not a thing that's like designed into the game. It's just that like people will do things like that.
Yeah.
No,
that's my point being, like, there are, but even within that, like, there was heavy consequence. It was hard to do, and it's not actually like no more time was being allotted. It was that they were sped up, essentially. Like, there's not. It's more that they're just doing everything faster than everybody else was, which is again a really interesting, like, this game invites that type of thinking about and reflecting on some of the different elements of that. For Sage Caleb, how much role did being the Lord of Time play in your games? Any at all?
Well, for me, I was mostly thinking about how we had a lot of discussions early on to what Jay was saying about the how it's a specifically tumultuous time. But if you look at the game as a genuine simulator of what it's like for wizards all the time, then something that comes up a lot, I think, when people are playing early is they're like, this pact is so doomed. This pact is doomed in 6 months every time. And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of because we're playing the cool time. We're playing the cool stuff.
Well, also because that's what it feels like.
Right.
Yeah.
And then but for at the time, the specific rules on time skips are pretty new. So we did do a lot of time stuff in our long-term campaign, and we usually use it to justify when drafts changed. Like when we got a new draft, we would then wrap up those characters, skip ahead 20 years, and then continue the story with the new draft of the rules. So like my big example of that was I played a child Hierophant, Caniel, who got kicked out of the pact, banished at the end of our campaign. We did a time skip, and then in our new campaign, we knew that character was like a messiah figure in another continent now, much older. So we've played with that, and I think it's a really good way to shift around who's playing what role, because you can become the previous wizard's apprentices, or you can jump far enough that it's a totally new set of people, and that works really, really well. I haven't had a lot of experience with like, let's just skip 4 months in the kind of like Mythic Bastion Land way, but I could totally see that working, especially if you start to feel like everybody's a little too burdened. We want to like kind of do a reset. I think that would be really great.
I do love that also because somebody asked the other day what happens when someone dies, and if everybody's like, well, yeah, they're just going to play a new version of that character, and they're like, well, I don't want to, and other people are like, well, I kind of want to try this out. You can just do that time skip, and then be like, cool, new new wizards, everybody, and keep
because
on
wizards live for a long time, it's also chill to be like, we jumped 20 years in the future. I'm staying my guy. He's still around. He's just 20 years older now.
In ours,
yeah.
So I love that. Sage, did anything come up with you for being the Lord of Time?
Yeah, I don't think a whole lot of that had the chance to really come up, but I do think the experience of being set loose basically after all the introductions had happened after the first wizard moot and all that. The experience of for me personally, it felt like I just simply didn't have enough time in the day because when you get your destinies, they're all sort of just randomly laid out for the most part. And I looked at my board and I said, well, this just won't do. And so I immediately set about trying to figure out how to uphold all of my responsibilities, how to engage with the other players while also like corralling my destinies to where I had wanted them to be. And it just took so much time.
Awesome. Love it.
I love the new epilogue rules, by the way. But giving the stage the like specific role of like, okay, fine, nobody's showing up to play anymore. It's your job to send everybody a Discord message of what happened to their wizard. Is a really, really smart move. It's very
I do want to talk about epilogues a little bit. So this is probably a great jumping off point for that. So this is how your season or sessions end, Jay. So like there is this way that there is a conclusion that can happen. Talk to us about is this something you designed early on? Did this come later in play? How has it evolved over time?
This is one of the last things I added to the game, and it came about because the sage and the sorcerer have always shared a lot of DNA. They're both trying to kind of be the wizard with the most stuff in charge. And the problem was I was trying to carve out more space for the sorcerer, and in doing so, he was stepping on the sage's toes a lot. And what I figured out was like a really crucial distinction was that the sorcerer cares about things that have been established, kind of like building up and building up, whereas the sage cares about what happens next. And I realized that I think the thing that would make the sage interesting is that like there must be a moment when the game ends. There just has to be, right? We play and eventually we are going to stop playing. And I thought it was really interesting if the sage's actual rules don't cash in until that moment, right? Because I realized I just don't really like, I guess that's kind of what winning in a game is, right? But like, I was really kind of interested in the idea of like, you've got a character who has a job, and that job definitionally can never be you can never tell if they've done a good or a bad job until after the game is over, no matter what, right? If we play for 20 years, the sage is still just kind of like, and it kind of gives the sage the ability to take really, really big swings, because it's like, well, even if things go, especially in like long games, right? Like if you're playing kind of indefinitely, the sage has this ability to take huge gambles, because the sage can let things get really, really, really bad and then swing it around and save the day. And I wanted the sage to experience those moments with any kind of like mentor character giving prophecies, right? Where it's like 1,000 years of darkness have descended across the land. But this is necessary and important because there's a young boy in a farming village who I have carefully groomed to go and kill the Dark Lord eventually. And don't worry about it's okay that this is going to take a long time. It's okay for like the pact to fall apart. It's okay for things to seem really bad, because if I can get my dominoes to go off, it'll be huge. And just the important thing was just it doesn't need to be checked until after the game is over. Whereas for other wizards, you can tell when they're doing a bad job in their moment. But for the sage, it's like the sage can seem like they're doing a bad job until they turn it around. And I thought that was really interesting, and that was kind of a goal for the design. And that's where the epilogue stuff came from. And also just because I think that like epilogues and endings of games are kind of an unappreciated or like kind of under discussed part of play. And I was really kind of interested in the idea of being like, well, what if the construction of the epilogue is kind of going on constantly during the game, and then that is kind of like a realized thing that can be discussed at the end of the game.
Love that. Pardon me. Did either of y'all, Caleb? Did you get to pull off epilogue stuff, or is that post your last play?
Epilogue's definitely newer, but the game we're talking about, that with the Sage that got the full sweep, we effectively did this because every single Destiny got revealed. So we pretty much did the epilogue procedure.
That was part of where the epilogue procedure came from, was seeing
Yeah.
that game and seeing other games where, like, at the end of the 3-shot, we all revealed our destinies and we're like, oh my god, that's crazy, you know. So yeah.
And I think the way that worked out was almost everybody had their destiny hit, and then the few that didn't confidently hit, we did at the time discuss, okay, did this happen? Did we get there? So I did get to experience something kind of like this, but that's why I was saying I really like the rules. I think they're a really great way to codify it.
Yeah, love it. Vic bringing in another classic good question, Vic style from the chat. Ask the question, what's something your wizard really wanted to do but you never quite had enough time to?
Make my child.
I was going to get there, Caleb.
It takes so long.
Sage, how about you? I know that your games, you said, ended a little bit early. So what are some things you had wanted to or were building to but never got quite the chance to achieve?
Yeah, so I mean, the things that we were building to was, first and foremost, the only thing that my Sage really wanted was to get out, which is just, impossible. That's the one thing that you can't have other than, infinite time or a normal relationship with gender. But so there was obviously that, but we were setting up like a really, really juicy conspiracy in which we had my Sage and I believe the Necromancer had both been involved in the killing of the old Sage and maybe also the old Necromancer. There was sort of a conspiracy going on amongst those two and also the old Faustian. And we were just setting up some really, really juicy, like, I know that you know that both of us have done something unforgivable. And we are going to start, selectively revealing information and forcing people to, make hard choices, knowing things that they shouldn't, things like that.
Caleb, besides making a child.
No, I just want to talk about the child.
Talk about the child.
Then. Well, in the grimoire, in case y'all haven't already talked about this, the anthropogenesis ability, which is the method I was using to create a child, the spell, requires you to actually cast like 12 spells, one at a time, as you piece together the person you're creating, from each different piece. And so whenever I had free time, I was adding a little bit to my ultimate created child, and I didn't make it very far, but that's okay. That's the point of some of those spells, is they're just projects.
They're there for you to work on when you have time.
Yeah, exactly.
What we constantly say about raising our children is
right.
Well, they are there for when we have time.
Sometimes you have a full-time job, and then nights and weekends you make the eyes and face, you make the back and shoulders.
I made it a little bit easier in I think at this point it won't take that many, but there is my favorite little thing of anthropogenesis now is something I've added, and I've not yet really, I got to test a little bit before I commit to it, but my idea is you do anthropogenesis, you get the soul for the being, and then you can invite a new player to the table to play as them.
Oh, that's so good.
I love that.
And they get 4 weeks of time, and they don't have a domain, and they're just like a dude that you cataphract style add another player to the game.
You're creating generational wealth in 7-part Pact. They can just exist without concern. Awesome. So anthropogenesis is the great work of artifice, which creates a being and imbues it with a soul. It's composed in 3 parts: the creation of the outer body, the creation of the inner body, and the creation of a soul. These 3 processes have their own limits, elements. As a great work, this spell is always of mythic importance. So you want to shout out any of the body parts you made that you were particularly proud of, Caleb?
I honestly might have only made and kept the eyes, because I had a couple. I was really going for, like, I'm obsessed with making this perfect. So whenever I got a roll I didn't love, I just kind of threw it out.
Oh, wow.
So I think I might have only successfully finished the eyes, and I do not even remember what the detail was that was great about those. But It was really, really fun, and it was fun because a lot of the great works are like this. You feel this really high pressure, but there's absolutely nothing else in the game forcing you to do it. So you're like, I need this to be perfect. This is such a big deal. It could go so bad, and almost always nothing about your actual board like needs you to be making a person. Like
no, but you want to make a person, don't you? It's like there's nothing requiring you to like go become a god or to construct another dimension,
right?
Or to like make a giant monster. But like, hey, you know what? Right? Like you're a wizard, right? What is being a wizard if you're not making chimeras and such?
And this is, I think this is why it's so good that there isn't a way to fix time, because time is usually the biggest friction you're feeling in the actual gameplay. And if you were to, almost every wizard would get to the point that's like, well, of course I'm gonna do the time travel one. Like that would just start happening to you. And so instead, having to be like, I want more time. Can I get more time with imps? Is like a very good.
The critical thing of the game is that if you are trying to play optimally, right, the best thing you can do is find a way to get yourself more time each month.
Yeah.
And that meant if there was any spell that granted that, like consistently, there would be no reason to cast any other spell in the game, because in the same way that like the best thing you can do in Magic the Gathering is get more mana and draw more cards, because that means that you can now play the cards you draw and play more cards each turn, right? It's kind of like you're engine building. And I didn't want this game to feel like an engine builder. I didn't want it to feel like there was like an optimal path towards like, yes, I will simply make more, I'll make more people who do more things, who churn out more stuff that will give me more time. I wanted it to instead feel like you are cobbling together kind of these plans and schemes, and like maybe you can find a path towards building something in particular, but like the limitation of time is really crucial to make the game feel like you are human and not gods.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, so good. Awesome. Any questions y'all have for Jay? Any things y'all want to discuss as we kind of draw to a close here? Also, just a reminder to those watching right now, if you've got a question, this is a great time to drop it in. And Danaran, I've seen your question, and I will bring that one up after this part.
Now I'm curious. I'm excited.
No is an okay answer, but I'll let y'all think upon it for just a minute. Jay, you had while I vamp.
Y'all seen the section on angels? Y'all have any thoughts on the section?
I sure did.
Angels and fairies were on my list of things also too. So, but I was going to say just real quick to shout it out. You have put some new materials up for backers to look at, because that came up a couple times this week on, can we look at the papers y'all are looking? Can we see this stuff? Tell us a little bit about what just got put up on the campaign.
Yeah, I put about the first half of the rule book. I put up one of the schools of magic. I put up the School of Enchantment, and I put up the Necromancer's Codex. This is just the text files. It does not have any of the layout that will be done. Doesn't have any of the art. It is not enough to play the game with. It is just enough to give you a sense of what the game looks like when you open it up. So it's kind of to help people who are kind of struggling to wrap their minds around what this is. They're like, is this like a board game with RPG elements tacked on? Is this an RPG with board game elements tacked on? Is this like, what are we doing here? How does this work? Here you go. Here's some stuff to look at. You will feel a little mystified and befuddled. That's the play experience. So you're in the wizard zone now.
Awesome. Yeah. So this section of the bottom section of the stage talks about a couple different groupings of people. The fairies explicitly talks a little bit about druids, and then it also does talk about angels also too.
People a complicated term for these angels, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using that as a general classification, not as a specific classification. And the other ones have rules and hierarchy and understanding that goes with them that build on each other. The angels section is 4 quotes from different people with wildly different perspectives on angels. It basically are a little bit of a shrug. It's great.
Yeah. They are shaped like men, but they move like birds, hollow bones like birds, but long arms and legs, with paper skin and wide wings. Their skin is too smooth, their faces sculpted from unformed clay. They do not look at me with recognition. I'm not sure if they have eyes behind their sockets. They congregate around me like a flock of birds, pulling back cautiously if I approach. Some have halos which obscure their eyes. Their feathers are soft and downy. Hell of those guys, right? Like, what's up with them?
Or
Sort of
greatly
had a-
held in contrast to angels have no place in the taxonomy of creation. They are born from nothing and do not seem to exist uniquely among all creatures. I do not believe they have a language.
That one's the real banger of this set, I think.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome. Oh, we did not get any of those. Caleb, Sage, any questions or parts of the conversation you want to touch on real quick?
It's not quite exactly Sage specific, but I do want to touch on the real aha moment for me in my campaign was early on, as we sort of went into our downtime actions. One of the other wizards went, I think I'm going to spend this week to go study magical items. And we said, you're going to what? And that was how we found out that there were secret downtime actions hidden in the other classes' playbooks that we had no idea about. And that was sort of the moment to me where I really, really understood what I was working with.
Yeah, Caleb, any thoughts from you?
No, I've said so much today. I think the only questions I can think of are kind of silly. Like, how did you end up choosing fairies for the Sage rather than the Mariner?
Yeah. So the fairies were originally with Mariner, as you know. Honestly, the Mariner had too many guys. The Sage didn't have enough guys.
Yes.
The Mariner had all these beasts. The Mariner had dragons and beasties. I kind of wanted the Mariner to have Nereids too. And then on my what do you call with the Sage, it was like the Sage didn't have much of anything, and it just made, like, fairies were one of those things where it's like they could live in the sea, they could live in dreams, and I was like, I think they're more interesting living in dreams. I think that kind of opens the door. So that was kind of my intent.
Yeah,
love it. So Sage and Caleb, I'm going to come back to you all in just a second and ask, as expert sages, what is advice you would give to somebody stepping into this for the first time? But Jay, before that, I'm going to ask you the cursed question, which is, and this has come up in a couple places today, so I think it's good to talk about. How is this game for spectatorship? Can or should people expect 7-part pack actual plays? Acknowledging that you don't control what any actual play channel does in the future explicitly.
I wield no power.
Yeah, what are your
power.
thoughts on 7-part pack from an actual play standpoint?
Yeah, you can do a 7-part pack actual play. I saw people discussing this in the Quinn's Quest server this morning. I think it's easier than you think. I think that the biggest thing is it's just I think that you've kind of got to make a choice of, are you going to do a lot of editing, or are you going to let there be a lot of bad audio time? Because the thing about the game is that it's not very, like, I think it would be fun to sit and watch. And like, I'd love to, I would enjoy just watching some people play 7-part pack, like just hanging out with them and like eating snacks and stuff and like being like, what you got going on over there, crew? But I don't think this would be a very fun game to put on stage. I don't really think it'd be a great game to like try and like just raw record like live stream, because it's not a game where I was trying to maximize like that kind of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, let's maximize the number of silly things people say. My goal was to instead be like, hey, we are, like, this is a game. You are playing the game for fun. And the goal of my game was not to maximize like, I don't know, it's performativeness, right? Which I think is a goal that a lot of people do talk about in the space currently, right? I've seen people talk about making RPGs for actual play, talk about how do you make an RPG that is kind of allows for an external performance. And I really didn't want to do that. So you can absolutely make an actual play of 7-part Pact. I think that just simply like putting a mic in the middle of a table and recording that will probably lead to a pretty unsatisfying game. or at least it will lead to a good game and an unsatisfying audio experience.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to, I'm not an actual play person. I do think editing will be valuable, and like picking out kind of narratives and kind of teasing them together. I think it'll probably resemble more of like an episode of a show than it will like a traditional like tabletop RPG actual play, because you want to kind of like, how do you tie these multiple perspectives in one thing? But also, I don't know. I think people are endlessly creative, and I think people will do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Uh I also think there are a lot of different versions of an actual play. Critical Prof who's in the chat said this is an AP moment as we recount how we are telling the stories of our play. Play reports are one of the earliest forms of actual play. And so like this whole week in a part has been kind of that old school actual play style, as M has called out. Someone mentioned what we do in the shadow style type mockumentary. Honestly, I think the best produced version, because I would probably, as somebody who's like, I like to just sit down and play the game and not do a ton of editing on our streams. Like that's fine. That's our choice as an exegetic stream. I would produce this as a reality TV show style of AP, where the wizard moots would be like everybody getting together and talking about what they do. Engagement scenes would be a high focus, and everything else would be handled confession booth style of the wizard saying, yeah, you want to know what shit I actually got up to this month, and then releasing somebody to edit all that footage together. If I was going to do an actual play of this, that is the mode that I would want to engage in. Is
You're backdoor piloting it right
I'm
now.
backdoor piloting once they were wizards, the reality TV show actual play of 7-part Pact.
And that's
right
the
now.
thing is that it's especially for this age, it's such a game of incomplete information.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of choices to be made about who sees what and when, you know.
Yeah, and I think like we've talked about this before, but one of the things about playing this game is that the idea of the spotlight works really differently than it does in a trad game. It's a lot harder to do anything like parody on like who's going to be visible in what scenes any given month, because each game interacts with like literally being a character who talks in like a different way. And so I could totally see a version of this where all of the actual play of Wizard Game happens in a play by post, and every month you go through the scenes you want to hit and make those narrative. I could see that work great. But and then on the other hand, also you're talking about having 7 performers on a long stream. That's just a tough thing to handle to begin with, and a lot, especially with how much time they'll be sitting there not really getting to talk. It would be a tough one. But I could see it being really fun.
It's also interesting. I will say, as a board game player, I think the flow of 7-part Pact is fucking perfect. Like in so many levels, because when other people are talking, if I'm not there in the scene, like I can pay attention. But if I'm not playing as, if you're playing as one of the higher wizards, you need to pay a little bit more attention. But if you're one of the low, you just be like, I'm not there. I don't have to know what's going on. I can just go. I can think about my next move on my board, which I spent a lot of time doing when I was playing, going back and forth between the two. And it's this great kind of interplay. So I never had downtime, but like the flow of the game moves very fast if everybody's making those switches. But a lot of people, if you've ever played board games with people who don't take them seriously, that's not how everybody plays a board game. The other thing also, there's a different way to think about spectators, I think, in this game than just actual play. If I was like, hey, we are going to get 7 people together to go to a cabin in the woods, and then some other people were like, well, we don't want to play the game, but we'd like to come watch and be there and hang out, I'd be like, hell yeah, that actually sounds great, as long as we're all bought into that. And if I was playing the Hierophant in that, I would just be like, oh, you're here? Cool, you're this NPC now, and I will probably bring you back to be this NPC repeatedly. Just FYI, you're this person now. And I would bring people in and out of play in that way also.
A thing I've thought a lot about is that the celestial audience is not necessarily confined to the 7 people at the table. you could absolutely expand the celestial audience to include other people who happen to be present as well.
Mega Game Wizards.
Mega Game Wizards.
Yeah.
I think that Mega Game Wizards is truthfully its own RPG, but I do think it'd be very fun to take 7-part Pact's magic system and slap that on Cataphracts.
Yeah.
That's my pitch.
That's your 2028 expansion.
That's my when I decide to go insane. That's
Yeah.
what I'll do. That's your sign that you need to check in on me a little bit.
Awesome. We will be back tomorrow. Just so everybody knows, I'm going to come to y'all in just 1 second for your final wizard advice, but just a few announcements. We're going to be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. To talk about our final day of Wizard Week. There's apparently some other week starting next week. I think it's about sharks. Never heard of it. But last day of Wizard Week is tomorrow at 8 p.m. We've got some amazing guests who will be on talking specifically about the sorcerer also too. So we will be there for that. If you can't join us live, it'll go to our YouTube channel just like always. Just a reminder to go over to ttrpg.link/7-part pact. No, wait, /7pp to check out 7-part pact also too. But Sage, why don't you tell us about your advice for fledgling sages? And then if you have anything you want to shill or plug, this is a great time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one advice that I would give for sages is just it could be a little intimidating. Just go in there and pay attention and be willing to let the game, I guess, sort of tell you what it needs. You're gonna see moments pop up where something might sort of, that little neuron might fire in your head. And I think that's really your sign to go pull something together. And in terms of things to plug, again, go ahead, hit me up on Blue Sky and pretty much anywhere else, non-binary with an L, that's nonbulnary.bsky.social. I'm nominated for a Crit Award, so, go check that out. That's in my pinned. Go through my media tab. I'm making cool stuff.
Love it. Thanks so much for being here. Caleb.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is tied to everything we've said so far about the Sage, which is like, you have the most room to take big risks and just really hope something works out, especially early in the game. And so absolutely slap those destinies everywhere. See if you can turn somebody into an evil king. Like, start early and then be willing to pivot, Chief Palpatine style, when it doesn't work out. I think that willingness, but I think that his advice goes to every wizard, honestly, is like, the game gets so much better, and I've seen this across my campaigns, it's so much better if the more people take a big swing early and like really make a call about something that they want or that they're going to create, and then allow the consequences and the failure of that to inform what they do next, and not be like a signal of whether or not you did a good job. Failure in this game is like a huge positive. It's very propulsive. So lean into that and be ready to be wrong about your friends and their destinies. For me, where you can find me, calebzane.bsky.social. You should listen to the podcast. Nightcrawler is my boyfriend. Please go listen to it. We're having
number one
an amazing
favorite
time.
podcast of the +1 EXP Warehouse team.
TM. And you should look up on the Haunted Table Patreon. I think it's just patreon.com/haunted table. We have a sample you can play of a game called The House Edge, which is a sort of roguelite time loop card crawl you can play using the Fist rules in the Triangle Agency universe, about playing mercenaries who are breaking into an anomalous containment facility and get trapped there, going through the same rooms over and over and over until they can finally escape. We're working on that, and we're going to crowdfund it later this year, so it would be great to see you there. But for now, if you want, you can join the Patreon for $3 and give it a test.
Love it. Jay, anything else you want to tag in or add on or read here at the end?
Yeah, let me hit you with a little bit of sage text. There's a little, where is it? Yeah, here we go. Actually, I'm going to pull up something from the rule book. Vamp for me for 1 second.
If you are going to be at Gen Con next week, we will be there, booth 449. Jay will be in the Steve Jackson Games booth. Kayla, are you going to be wandering around?
Yeah, I'll be at Gen Con somewhere. Who knows where? But you can find Triangle Agency stuff at Crown, and we'll probably do a signing.
Awesome.
The crown booth. Yeah.
Love to hear it. Also, if you haven't yet, we also have a Kickstarter backer kit campaign live right now for 3 short form carved from Brindlewood Games that we're publishing in partnership with Gauntlet. They each take 2 to 3 sessions, usually just 2 sessions, to play, but they are 3 different types of horror mysteries. You can go to ttrpg.link/BV3. I'll drop that link down in the chat below, or support us over at rpgzine.club, any award-winning RPG Zine club now also too. But Jay, you find the piece you want to close us out with.
I did. The certainty of the Pact. The Pact is as unbreakable and true as the mountains or the seas, as fundamental to the consciousness of man as the divine right of kings. Individual wizards may rise and fall, their powers waxing and waning, their desire eclipsing and threatening the firmament upon which the Pact was built. The rules of the game may change fundamentally, the rights of wizards unrecognizable from what came before, but the Pact will not fall. If the Pact did fall, one must presume that it would be the responsibility of the present wizards to work together to build whatever comes next, abandoning the rules of their world and building something new. Such a world would be destined for tragedy, its firmaments unsteady, its cosmos likely to fall apart into a useless anarchy. The stars would be unbalanced, the laws lacking design, the social order upended. To imagine such a world without the Pact and the stewardship of the wizards present would be a fool's fancy. It could not last. Such a world is far beyond the scope of these books.
All right. And we'll see everybody at the next moot. Thanks for coming by, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.